Hour number 2 of the program here, and we kick it off with our friend Chris Zanuck. You know him on Twitter as Las Vegas Chris. He is a multi-time contest winner, NFL football contest here in Las Vegas. And again, you can follow him on Twitter at Las Vegas Chris. Chris, good to have you in studio here. And we've even dragged you into some of the summertime golf betting. You've been at our major championship drafts and whatnot. So you're expanding your horizons in the summertime.
I am, and I appreciate that commemorative pigeon license plate you gave me.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I did okay the first week, but afterward it was kind of rough.
Yeah, you finished in the money. I believe it was for the Masters. Well, let's get to the NFL. Obviously, that is not far away. As I mentioned, the preseason begins in earnest tomorrow night and throughout the rest of the weekend. I'll start with the Super Bowl champs. I want to kind of ask you, I'm going to throw out a team out there, and if you think they are a fade or a follow in the upcoming season, do you expect a decline out of the team or off of what they did last year? Maybe they're ready for progress to the upswing, if you will. And I'll start again with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. A lot was made of the 22 starters coming back from their Super Bowl team, and I think Wes and I both agreed that that's kind of been baked into their pricing surrounding all the offseason hype because of all those starters returning this year. What are your thoughts on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Chris? Division, Super Bowl, season win total. Are you backing them or are you going against Tampa Bay?
Well, first of all, what's really important to me is actually keeping an open mind on all these teams, because I'm doing a lot of work, deep dives into all these teams. And yeah, I'm going to form some opinions, and I'm going to make very few pre-flop wagers. I don't want to be having predispositions about teams. I don't care what anybody says. If you have futures on teams and you're getting into the middle of the season, and you've got Buffalo for season wins over, and you're trying to decide on teams to bet, it's going to subconsciously hit you if it doesn't overtly hit you. For most people, it's right out there in front of you. Oh, I don't want to go against my team and stuff like that. So I want to avoid that as much as possible. And then secondly, every year we have huge surprises. Every year, week 2, everybody's panicking or jumping up and down and all excited about this breakout team. The overreaction to how the seasons start. And when you look at where the seasons end, how many teams are in the playoffs that nobody expected to be in the playoffs? So just a little background there. So if I'm, giving an opinion, it's always take it with a grain of salt, because I'm going to pivot right away. If I like a team, I'm going to bash a few teams here today, but I'll be happy to pivot on a dime.
That's a great point, too, that you make. And that's not to say don't get involved in the season win totals market if you think you have an edge. But that's what fantasy players, like DFS players, always find themselves in this quandary in the NFL, where it's like, that's going to conflict with your betting interests necessarily. So like your season wins can kind of conflict with your week-to-week betting interests, where it's like, well, I really like these guys for the over season wins, so that means I got to bet them every single week. No, you don't necessarily have to double down. You have to take situation by situation.
Yeah, and also if you're looking at the futures market, there's usually a larger hold percentage, and you're not getting as much value betting these teams. And as most people have heard, sometimes you can bet these in season. I mean, certain teams have a really rough start. Why would you bet them pre-flop?
Right.
So, Miami's got a horrible start of the season. You're not going to bet them early if you think they have any hope, and similar things. But getting with the Tampa Bay, it is one of the 2 bets that I placed. I placed like plus 360 to win the NFC. I don't think they're going to go for the 17-0. I think they're just going to go about their business. I think they're going to rest players. I think with this added game, I think it's going to just get too much. I think that teams are going to pull players out like the NBA. They're going to give them a week off and such. So you're not going to see something that extreme. But I just don't see bringing back all the starters how they won't be there in the end.
All right, very good. So there's your answer. It's not a fade, but probably more of a follow on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the defending Super Bowl champion for Las Vegas Chris. Welcome back in for those of you just joining us. This is the Lombardi line. Brady Cannon and Wes Reynolds with you. Hour number 2, live from the South Point Hotel, Casino, and Spa. And And in studio, we have our friend Chris Zanuck. You can follow him on Twitter at Las Vegas Chris. He is a multi-time NFL football contest winner here locally in Las Vegas, going over some teams and getting Chris's opinion on them for the coming season. We'll go to the AFC East, Chris, and the favorite to win the division is the Buffalo Bills. Also, obviously a very successful season last year. The New England Patriots, not so successful last year. What are your thoughts on these two clubs?
What, do you know anybody that doesn't like Buffalo this year?
No, I don't.
No, it's like we've already.
I think Wes and I.
It's already printed in the newspaper that they're just going to run away.
Didn't they win it all?
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, this is a team that got their ass handed to them by Kansas City. Mm-hmm. They don't have the personnel to match up against them. And, you know, we're taking a lot of I like Buffalo, don't get me wrong. But I can't believe that they gave Allen that kind of a contract after one solid year. You're talking about somebody that came out of college with a 55% passer rate, completion rating. He didn't do that great in the beginning of his NFL career, and he has one great season, and it's payday for this guy.
Yeah, that's a great point, too. And he had that great season with Brian Daboll as his offensive coordinator, who's still there in Buffalo. But, oh, by the way, when you mentioned that long-term contract, Brian Daboll is probably going to get a head coaching job. He was kind of in that interview mix. We know how this works, guys. When you're a coordinator and you're raising your profile, you take all these interviews you can, then you fall just short. Maybe you're the second or third choice, and then you get back in that interview pool for coaches the next year, and then all of a sudden, okay, this is the guy, he's ready to go. So Brian Daboll has absolutely helped Josh Allen's game, but after this year, you know, where is Josh Allen going to be without him? So I think that, you know, it's right to be at least a little bit cynical about that deal.
I really liked Buffalo last year, Chris, when they lost that playoff game to the Houston Texans, and they really should have won that game. I said, you know what, this is a bet-on team, I feel, in the following year, and they were very successful, obviously, last year. I just don't know if they can get even better than they were last year.
Well, if you look at their draft, it was boy, I had the ranking handy. It was so-so, but what they did was they drafted extra depth at the positions that they were already strong in, and they didn't fill the holes that they needed to do. Their run defense is atrocious. I mean, it's awful. And who are they going to be facing? They're going to be facing New England, and that's their strength. So with Buffalo, they still have tight end issues. They lost their return man. They needed another number 2 corner, and they didn't add depth to defensive tackles. Now, look at the drop-off from 2 years ago. They were a monster defensive team 2 years ago.
Yes.
And I had them in my metrics in the 20s most of the season. And granted, they made a great, headway there. They should have won 12 or 13 games in a row. I forget what it is other than that Hail Murray. So they went on a run. But they were very pedestrian. They were bottom 15 for much of the season on my metrics. So are they going to have another drop-off? And you got second-year pressure. You got Josh Allen, who's been paid. There's a lot of questions with that team.
And a difficult schedule. It's manageable early, but then you get Kansas City and Tennessee on the road. As Chris mentioned, Kansas City really got the better of the Bills in the playoffs last year. So you got Kansas City and Tennessee back-to-back on the road. You've got road trips to New Orleans. I know New Orleans going through some shaky spots right now, but still not an easy place to win in the Superdome. You got to go to Tampa Bay, New England. Looks like they may be improved, and that kind of leads me to the rest of the division. Obviously, the New York Jets, a rookie quarterback, they're rebuilding, but what about Miami and New England? Which of those two teams, if any, do you prefer over the other? Because I think that there's a sense some people think that there's going to be improvement with those teams.
Well, I don't know about Miami. I think a lot of people are down on Miami. As far as Miami goes, I bet Miami was one of my bread and butter teams last year. Mm-hmm. But, geez, I was kind of laughing, at a few of those victories they got. The defense really carried them. And is that fumble luck and is that health luck? What's going to happen with them this year? They still have offensive line troubles, but they added the wide receiver weapons with Fuller and Waddle.
They're doing everything they can help to out.
Right. And he had a lot of problems last year, and he had problems learning the playbook. He 50% under, completion rate under pressure. He took sacks. He couldn't throw the ball downfield, and the receivers couldn't get open. There were a lot of, factors going on there. So I really trust the coaching there, though, to get the most out of this guy. And I love the fact that they platooned him with Fitzpatrick. I just love the in and out, but he doesn't have that security blanket anymore.
How about the New England Patriots?
I was looking at futures, and Miami has worse odds. They're ranked second in the division on the futures, and I can't understand why New England wouldn't be number 2.
I agree.
That makes no sense to me. I was thinking last year, we know they had the most opt-outs last year for COVID. Mm-hmm. We know that they had the injuries. People forget that Newton was doing quite well until he had the COVID designation. So when he came back, he said, "I was lost. I didn't understand. This is too advanced." He admitted, I was in over my head. I'm stepping up to the line. I'm not knowing what's going on. So, but I thought, why in the hell would Belichick come back if he didn't know he had something there? He has something there. And New England did a lot of things right subtly. They were one of the 2 teams that I lost money with last year because their metrics were actually very high. And so they're doing a lot of things right. I just don't think that they got the breaks. Another unusual stat, Ed Fang from Power Rank was doing the lucky bounce interception stats. I forget what they're, bad ball stats. And believe it or not, as bad as we think Cam Newton is, he's in the top 5 ready to regress to the positive because he had bad interception luck. He had no support last year.
And he had a bad receiving core, too.
Well, who were the receiving core? Now they're going back to the old formula with 2 tight ends.
Yeah, 2 really good ones.
They've got a top 5 offensive line. They're going to stuff the ball down teams' throats, and Buffalo's weakness, Achilles' heel. So New England can make a hell of a lot of movement in this division, in my belief. I don't think Belichick is sitting around waiting to embarrass himself at 70 years old.
All right, let's move over to the NFC, and I'll take a look at the NFC West with you, Chris. I know you and I have had some conversations off air about what is arguably the best division in football. The Rams are the favorite there. The San Francisco 49ers are the second choice, followed by the Seahawks and the Arizona Cardinals. I don't think there's really a bad team in this division, and there might be a couple that could be in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, we talked about this. I call it the Yahtzee division, and you may think I'm nuts, but I honestly will not be surprised. And this is one of the things that I do in my handicapping is I ask why not. Okay, I think it's very important of why not and can do. Trying to go against the grain and try to just think outside the box. And I look at the Rams; they have no depth. They lost a key player in every segment of their lineup, and they have no depth, none. And you're asking Stafford to come in there. I love Stafford. I saw him. I'm a Lions fan. I love the guy, but boy, they're putting a lot on his plate and a lot of high expectations. I'm not sold that the Rams are going to be able to hold it together. So then you go to San Francisco, and well, you don't have to look far. You saw what happened last year, okay? So it can't repeat? Of course it can repeat. Seattle's very inconsistent. If anything, I might be a little higher on them this year. I haven't done my deep dive on them, but I could say why not with Seattle. They've done pretty well. And Arizona, sure, they've got a coaching issue that could be better, but they've got a hell of a lot of talent on that team. And if Murray gets hot, Murray is one of the best quarterbacks with that metric that I spoke of, with not throwing bad balls. He's throwing less than 10% toss-up balls. So I believe that division can go any which way under the right circumstances. But I would favor San Francisco, of course, I think. But
And let me go back to the Rams for just a second, because one of the schools of thought, obviously, with Matthew Stafford coming in, is that, okay, we've upgraded, obviously, over Jared Goff. But now Matthew Stafford is with a team that their defense can get stops. He was not, being a Lions fan, there were times Matthew Stafford had to come from behind and always had to throw the ball 45 times and put up some points. But now you've got a Rams defense that can get some stops, and maybe there's some games where they can win the Rams with 20 or 23 points, where Matthew Stafford doesn't have to throw for 300 yards and throw 45 times a game. So do you think, because we were Brady and I were talking about the other day, if you get into like player awards or player props, passing yards, like we were looking at the under for Stafford's passing yards at 4,600 because we thought, you know what? The defense is going to take care of business, and maybe they're not going to have to be overly aggressive with play calling because they're not going to be behind in as many games.
Well, what's surprising, a lot of people thought that Stafford's stats and metrics were because he was always coming from behind. But if you do a deep dive with Stafford, they're identical. They're very similar whether he's ahead or behind. So that bodes well for what he can do. We're just going to have to see with that team. I think there is no way to predict it.
There is some room for disappointment, and I do like the Rams. They're a team I'm kind of high on, but I do agree with you. There is room for disappointment because we now know, Brady, Rams are all in, and they are not building for 5 years from now. They have traded a lot of their draft picks. They have their money tied up in about 6 or 7 big contracts on this whole roster. So you have guys without those big contracts that got to play to their capabilities. So there is a potential for this to go sideways because they're going all in either for this year and for next year. And then after that, wide open in terms of how they can decline.
Chris, I think it's a consensus here at the desk. We all kind of have hopes on the New York Giants that they could progress this season. They could be on an uptick. Let's look at the NFC East. Obviously, the Dallas Cowboys, the favorite there to rebound off of the Dak Prescott injury last year. The Washington football team, they win that division. A lot of people are high on them. Everybody's down on the Philadelphia Eagles. And I think all three of us, like I say, would probably lean towards the over on a season win total or what have you for the New York Giants. We think they should rebound to the positive. What are your thoughts on this division?
I made a quick move on this. This was my only other future bet because I took the Giants plus 500. I was pretty optimistic about them, and I was excited Galladay was going there. They're going to get Barkley back. They're going to be pretty loaded in some cases. Their offensive line is just weak, and obviously Daniel Jones has got to produce this year. And if all he has to do is stop the fumbles and the mistakes, if he can just become serviceable, and as a Lions fan, just be an Eric Kramer, just be functional.
Yes,
and. They'll get very good results. I mean, their defense is projected by many to be top 10. If they get a top 10 defense in that division, well, they can certainly win it.
Chris mentioned it, Brady, too, with Saquon Barkley back. And I know we've been talking about the Giants on a couple of these shows over the last couple of weeks. We remember that kerfuffle at training camp where Daniel Jones is at the bottom of the pile. And it's like, look, you don't want that Q in the red and the orange jersey to be involved in this stuff. But I think that also kind of sends a message to the team that, hey, maybe this guy is a leader. He's all in here. We got to help our guy out. And to Chris's point, Kenny Galladay coming in. John Ross out of the slot, a speedster out of Washington, comes in from the Bengals. Kadarius Toney, the Florida Gator. But what Chris mentioned about this offensive line, Andrew Thomas was a guy they drafted out of Georgia in the first round. I believe this is now his second year. Will Hernandez in his third year. This is a very young offensive line. And that's kind of the weakness of this offense because they've got plenty of weapons. Looking at this receiving core, I'm like, this is a pretty darn good core. And then you add Saquon Barkley, one of the best running backs in the NFL. I think the Giants got a lot of potential, and I think they're the team that they're sleeping on in the NFC East.
What is your opinion on the Washington football team, Chris? I really like their coaching staff. I don't think there's much argument about their defense. Obviously, Ryan Fitzpatrick comes in at quarterback now, and, he's certainly not an elite quarterback, but probably an upgrade from what they had last year. What are your thoughts on this team going forward? Can they win the division again? Are they looking at the playoffs, or are you going against the Washington football team this year? They do have a very difficult schedule.
Well, you guys both like Washington, don't you?
We like the Giants.
I like both the Washington football team and the Giants in this division.
here's where thinking outside of the box and thinking, well, why can't it happen, comes into play. And you have to be open-minded and not be surprised. You know, when I look at season win totals, I can make the case for almost every team going, 3 wins one way or 3 or more wins the other way. And Washington certainly fits into this category of where I'm kind of passionate about. And since you guys are going to break, let me pick it up after the break.
All right. So he's got some passion about the Washington football team.
I can't fit it in 1 minute.
I think I know which way you're going there. And I don't necessarily – I think you're looking to maybe possibly fade this team. We'll hear about it more on the other side. And you look at that schedule, and absolutely. But I think we can agree – I don't know. We've got 30 seconds here. Do you think Ron Rivera is the best coach in that division?
I love him as a coach, but are you going to tell me Fitzpatrick, who's been in the league 16, 17 years and has had one great year, we're going to bank that he's going to do that again? He's one of the worst quarterbacks. He's a bottom 5 quarterback in his 30s. He's 38 years old now.
All right, that is Las Vegas Chris. Check him out on Twitter. We'll keep him over another segment here and get his fiery opinion on the Washington football team as we roll on the Lombardi line at VSIN, the Sports Betting Network. Welcome back into the Lombardi line, presented by our friends at BetMGM. Brady Cannon and Wes Reynolds with you, and our friend Chris Sanook at Las Vegas Chris on Twitter here in the studio, sticking around for another segment. We were talking about the NFC East. All three of us, a little bit of upside on the New York Giants, we figure, in the coming season. Certainly that offense has added some firepower. The Washington football team, I get the feeling Chris is not so high on them. Chris? The Washington football team, what do you think?
The WFT or the WTF for this club?
Well, people that are expecting them to win the division, how many times are they favored this year?
Yeah, not very many.
3 or 4, depending on the sports book. And you're going to bet them over 8.5 and to win the division? I mean, are you Looney Tunes? Last year, they faced one of the easiest schedules in the NFL. Not only was it easy, but they had a +8 rest advantage. Now they come into this year playing a first-place schedule. They have one of the worst, I think either number 1 or number 2 worst rest schedule disadvantages at -14. That's a 20-game difference. Let's take a look at their schedule, okay? Chargers.
Yep.
They're supposed to be much improved. So they open against the Chargers. That's a hit or miss. It's a 50-50 shot. Hold on 1 second.
Well, you've got it there on the graphic there. If you look up there on the screen, you got the Chargers, then the Giants,
so the
then
Giants,
at the Bills.
Right. So you've got the Giants. So those are both, close to coin flip games. A lot of high aspirations for the Chargers. So let's just say they go 1-1 there. Is it unreasonable? They could go 0-2. They go to the Bills. They go at the Falcons, which a lot of people are high on the Falcons. Mm-hmm. They go to the Saints, and they may be, a mess. Okay, we don't know, but right. They have a strong team. Don't get me wrong. Okay, they're strong all over, and they're getting bad headlines, but they're still a good team. But that's still not an easy game to win, even with their injury situation. They go to Kansas City. They go to Green Bay, and they go to Denver. They could be 0-8 at their bye week.
That's true.
You can't say that it's not possible. I'm not predicting this, so don't throw it in my face later. I'm just saying it's possible. But it's 1-7, 2-6. That's not out of the realm of possibility. Let's look after the bye. After the bye, you're going to Tampa Bay. You're going to Carolina. You guys are high on Carolina. Everybody's high on Carolina. Then you're playing the Seahawks.
Then you finally get the Raiders. Maybe they can come up for air at that point.
But you have to go to the Raiders.
Yes, true.
So is 0-12 impossible?
Well, and you look at the back end of the schedule, too. 5 of their 6 in-division games are their last 5 games of the season. Twice with Dallas, twice with Philly, and then once with the Giants. And it's not like there's a lot separating those teams. But to Chris's point on that schedule, how much are they going to have left for those division games? I know with only 4 teams in a division, a little bit less of a premium than years past when you had 5 teams in a division and you played 8 divisional games. But the division games are what you still want to put priority on, obviously, because that settles the tiebreakers if that gets into that situation. And just looking at that to end with 5 divisional games, I think this team could very much be out of gas. And then from a personnel standpoint, Ryan Fitzpatrick is a guy that everybody on, gambling, football, Twitter, social media, and whatnot love. Fitzmagic, because he comes in relief and sometimes can do the job like he did with Miami last year. But he is a well-traveled guy. He was obviously on the back 9 of his career, and Chris and I were talking about that during the break. So I think the expectations have gotten too high on this team.
Well, you have to remember, in Miami, that was going to be a vacation for him last year. There was no pressure on him. He was the savior. What has happened every single other time Fitzpatrick had expectations on him? I mean, he was like the Hindenburg every time.
Yeah, exactly. Some guys, when you're the guy.
It's like Nick Foles, right?
Yeah.
He succeeded as a backup.
Exactly. And that was kind of the concern, even though I thought he had a solid season last year with Ryan Tannehill in Tennessee. It's like, okay, when you were the guy in Miami, you were the shiny new toy. Everybody was with you. But then it's like, we've kind of seen what we've seen. And then they moved on. And then Mariota flamed out a little bit in Tennessee, and Tannehill came in. And it was like, okay, this is the guy. But once you get that contract and you're the man, it's a totally different scenario.
One last point. That great defense that won 7 games last year, let's look at those 7 wins. They beat Carson Wentz. They beat Andy Dalton, relieved by DiNucci. They beat Joe Burrow, relieved by Finley. They beat Andy Dalton. They beat Nick Mullins. They beat Jalen Hurts, relieved by Nate Sudfeld. They beat Ben Roethlisberger. That was the one win.
Very good. That is Las Vegas Chris. Check him out on Twitter at Las Vegas Tris, and get ready for contest season with our man here in Las Vegas. Thank you, Chris. We'll talk to you again down the road. We'll come back with some baseball here on the Lombardi Line.